My name is Lauren. I am 29 years old. 2 months ago, my mother texted me the night before my sister's engagement dinner to tell me not to come. Not because I'd done anything wrong. She said, and I remember this exactly because I read it 4 times before setting my phone down. Stay home. We gave your seat to a VIP guest. I didn't cry. I stayed completely silent. That silence wasn't weakness. It was a learned survival mechanism against years of emotional manipulation. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Let me know down in the comments. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I didn't beg for an explanation or demand a seat at a table where I clearly wasn't wanted. I just opened my laptop and started typing. Anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical. I shut off my phone, severing the connection to their toxicity, and redirected my focus entirely into reviewing a new client case file. Just days prior, I had successfully submitted and closed a massive $2.5 million forensic audit report for a major corporate client. That was my world now. Precision, facts, and undeniable ledgers. I had been the silent investor in their version of family for 29 years. Growing up in Chicago, the familial ledger was always unbalanced. My older sister Megan was the undisputed golden child. She was 31, loud, demanding, and constantly requiring applause. My mother, Angela, operated our household like a boutique public relations firm, and Megan was her star client. Megan received the color-coordinated birthday parties, the fully funded private college tuition, and the endless praise for simply existing. It all culminated in this lavish $15,000 engagement dinner at the elite Sterling Country Club. I was just the spare asset, the one who was expected to manage herself so they could funnel all their resources into Megan's perfect narrative. While Megan was handed everything on a silver platter, I funded my own education. I worked grueling late-night shifts, took out massive student loans, and pored over heavy accounting textbooks while they were out celebrating Megan's latest mediocre milestone. I built my independent forensic audit firm in absolute, total silence. Nobody in my family ever bothered to ask about my career or how I paid my rent. They didn't understand financial investigations, so they didn't care. To them, I was just Lauren, the quiet girl who crunched boring numbers somewhere in the city. They had no idea that I had spent the last 5 years tearing apart complex corporate fraud cases. They didn't know the weight of my reputation in the financial sector or the high-stakes battles I fought daily. And I never told them. You learn to stop offering pieces of your life to people who are entirely committed to misunderstanding you. My mother's text uninviting me was just the final, undeniable entry on a balance sheet that had been bleeding red for decades. The emotional relationship was completely bankrupt. Sitting in my sterile, quiet office, I rubbed my eyes trying to summon regret, but there was only cold clarity. This wasn't an emotional breakdown. It was a strict accounting of facts. I didn't need their $15,000 dinner. I didn't need their superficial toasts or fake smiles. I had my firm. I had my integrity. I had built a fortress of absolute independence, and their complete lack of interest in my life had secretly been the greatest gift they could have ever given me. I closed the client file, took a sip of my cold coffee, and prepared for the next working day. The golden child could have her night. I had my own empire to run, and I didn't need their permission to thrive. The next morning, the silence of my office was broken by the harsh buzz of my phone. I had turned it back on to check an urgent email from a partner, only to find a new barrage of messages from my family. If I had expected an apology or a sudden reversal of their cruelty, I would have been severely disappointed. But I expected nothing, and they delivered exactly that. Angela and Megan were doubling down, proving with every keystroke that they had absolutely no remorse for cutting me out. Angela had sent a lengthy text attempting to reframe her cruelty as a mere logistical necessity. "Lauren, I hope you understand," the message read. "The Sterling Country Club is at max capacity. Jonathan's family has so many important executives flying in, and we just had to give your seat to one of his VIPs. It's absolutely necessary to impress his wealthy in-laws." She didn't stop there. The sheer audacity of her next sentence was breathtaking. "However, we still expect you to send a lavish gift off the registry. It's crucial that you keep up appearances so Jonathan's family doesn't think there is a rift." I read the text twice. Keep up appearances. That was the only currency my mother traded in. She didn't want me at the $15,000 dinner, but she fully expected me to subsidize the illusion of our happy family. I didn't respond. I didn't type out a furious paragraph. I simply took a screenshot and filed it away in a secure folder. This wasn't family anymore. This was a hostile negotiation, and I was documenting everything. Then, out of morbid curiosity, I opened social media. Megan had been busy. She was posting passive-aggressive updates online, clearly targeted at my silence. There was a photo of her and Angela drinking mimosas, captioned, "So grateful for the people who actually show up for you. Family loyalty means everything." Another post read, "Surrounding myself only with positive energy for my big day, cutting out the dead weight." Sitting in my pristine, quiet office, surrounded by stacks of financial records and forensic software, I let the anger solidify my resolve. The sterile hum of the air conditioning contrasted sharply with the toxic, chaotic noise radiating from my phone screen. I looked at the heavy, dog-eared accounting textbooks lining my shelves. They represented thousands of hours of unseen labor. They represented the life I had built with zero support, zero encouragement, and zero safety net. I thought about the subscription I had been paying for their affection, the emotional labor, the quiet endurance of their slights, the constant acceptance of being second best. The subscription was officially canceled. They weren't shocked by what they had done. They were only going to be shocked that I had finally stopped playing along. I set my phone face down on the polished wood of my desk. I didn't block them yet. I wanted them to keep talking. I wanted them to keep providing evidence of their own moral bankruptcy. I turned my attention back to the spreadsheets glowing on my monitor. The numbers were clean, the numbers never lied, and the numbers told me that I owed them absolutely nothing. While I sat alone in my Chicago office crunching data, the stakes of this conflict were escalating from petty family drama to a high-tier professional arena. It was Saturday evening. The engagement dinner was officially commencing at the elite Sterling Country Club. I pictured the scene with clinical detachment. The crystal glasses clinking. The $15,000 floral arrangements. My mother beaming as she paraded Megan around the room to impress Jonathan's old money family. I was completely physically removed from the venue, but my presence was about to crash the party in a way none of them could have ever predicted. Jonathan's uncle, Arthur, was a notoriously sharp and incredibly powerful board member of the groom's family trust. He was a man who lived and breathed corporate finance, attending these social functions out of sheer obligation. As the appetizers were being served, Arthur stepped away from the crowded table to check his phone. He had just received an executive email from the trust's legal team, finalizing the successful recovery of stolen funds from one of their major subsidiaries. Attached was a digital feature published early Friday by a leading financial industry newsletter, highlighting the independent firm that had just saved them. Arthur already knew the grim details of the devastating $2.5 million embezzlement scheme. What he didn't know was the face of the brilliant auditor who had tracked the hidden offshore accounts, identified the forged signatures, and rescued them from catastrophic insolvency just days prior. Opening the attached profile, a high-resolution professional photograph of me standing in front of the Chicago skyline dominated his screen. The shock hit Arthur like a physical blow. The company I had just rescued from absolute ruin was a major subsidiary of his own family's holding company. He stared at the screen. The article strictly adhered to client confidentiality and didn't name the victimized company, but it detailed how my firm had brilliantly resolved a massive, complex financial crisis in the Midwest. Arthur easily connected the exact timeline and the $2.5 million figure to the internal legal reports he had just reviewed. The article praised my relentless precision, my cold logic, and my unyielding integrity. Arthur looked at the photograph again. He recognized the last name. He knew Megan's maiden name. He quickly scrolled down to the biographical section of the profile. It mentioned my Chicago roots and my background. The realization snapped into sharp, undeniable focus. The brilliant forensic auditor who had just saved his family's multi-million-dollar empire from utter devastation was the sister of his nephew's new fiancé. Back in my office, I was drinking cold coffee, entirely unaware of the detonation occurring miles away. I was reviewing a tax code variance, completely at peace with my silent Friday night. But at the Sterling Country Club, the atmosphere was about to violently rupture. Arthur walked back to the dinner table, his eyes locked on my mother and sister. He held his phone tightly, the glowing screen of the financial feature serving as the ultimate trump card. The professional world had just violently collided with my family's superficial charade. My work, the empire I had built in the dark while they ignored me, had just stepped into the blinding light of their $15,000 dinner. Arthur didn't wait for a lull in the conversation. He walked straight to the head of the table, commanding the attention of everyone seated around the expensive floral centerpieces. He held up his phone, the financial newsletter's feature glowing brightly against the dim, romantic lighting of the country club. "Is anyone here related to Lauren?" he asked, his voice booming over the soft clinking of silverware. "The forensic auditor featured in tonight's executive briefing?" Angela froze. The polite practice smile on her face instantly shattered. She looked at Arthur, then at the glowing screen. Panic flared in her eyes. "Lauren?" she stammered, frantically trying to maintain her polished facade. "Yes, she is my daughter. She's currently on a very demanding business trip overseas and couldn't make it back in time for tonight." It was a desperate, pathetic lie. But before Angela could spin the narrative further, Aunt Teresa, who was seated halfway down the table, slammed her crystal wine glass down. Teresa had spent 29 years watching Angela dismiss me, and she was entirely out of patience. "Overseas business trip?" Teresa's voice cut through the elegant room like a serrated knife. "Angela, stop lying to these people. You explicitly uninvited her from this very dinner just 2 days ago via a text message." The silence that fell over the Sterling Country Club was deafening. The wealthy in-laws, including Jonathan and his parents, stared in absolute horror. "Uninvited her?" Arthur demanded, his brow furrowing in deep disgust. "The brilliant woman who literally just protected our family's primary holding from an absolute financial catastrophe was explicitly told not to come to this dinner?" Angela stammered, her face flushing crimson. She tried to babble something about headcount restrictions and venue logistics, but the damage was totally irreversible. In that exact moment, the true mechanics of their cruelty were laid bare. This is the illusion of power of an empty wallet. Angela's entire identity was built on having status, on grasping desperately for the approval of old money. She operated under the hollow delusion that displaying a $15,000 party gave her absolute power. But Lauren represented being undeniable, self-made integrity, and actual, tangible skill. Angela's cruelty stemmed from a desperate need to protect her fragile social illusion against the undeniable reality of my success. She couldn't handle that the daughter she deemed a worthless outsider was actually the most valuable person in the room. The in-laws watched as Angela and Megan's moral bankruptcy was completely exposed to the light. Megan sat frozen in her expensive dress, her golden child status dissolving in real time as the groom's family looked at her with pure, unfiltered disdain. They weren't just ungrateful, they were morally vacant. They had prioritized a superficial seating chart over the brilliant auditor who had literally protected the financial foundation of the family they were trying to marry into. The power dynamic flipped with sickening speed. Angela's pathetic attempts to align herself with my newly minted prestige died in her throat. The wealthy in-laws weren't impressed by the expensive ambiance. They were horrified by the profound lack of character. The villains had meticulously orchestrated their own spectacular social ruin entirely without my help. The karmic justice that followed was swift, brutal, and absolutely absolute. Disgusted by the profound hypocrisy of Angela and Megan, Jonathan's powerful family made a collective, unspoken decision right at that dinner table. They completely bypassed the superficial hosts. First thing Monday morning, while my mother and sister were still drowning in the catastrophic social fallout of their ruined weekend, the executive board of Jonathan's Family Trust contacted my firm directly. I was sitting at my desk when the call came through. It was Arthur. He didn't mention the disastrous engagement dinner. He didn't mention my mother. He spoke to me strictly as a seasoned professional, officially offering my independent audit firm a massive, permanent top-tier retainer to oversee their entire corporate portfolio. It was a multi-year contract worth more than Angela and Megan could even begin to comprehend. I accepted the offer with cold, clinical professionalism. The transaction was perfectly clean. The power had permanently shifted. Angela and Megan's social standing in Jonathan's elite circle was utterly destroyed overnight. They had tried to exclude me to protect their pristine image, but their image was now entirely synonymous with cruelty and deceit. That afternoon, my phone began to vibrate endlessly on my desk. The screen lit up with Angela's name. I let it ring. Then came a call from Megan. I let that ring too. When I finally checked my voicemail, the sheer desperation was palpable. "Lauren, please call us back." Angela's voice trembled through the speaker, stripped of all its former arrogance and entitlement. "There's been a terrible, terrible misunderstanding. We are so incredibly proud of you. Jonathan's family is asking all these questions, and we just need you to talk to them. Please, Lauren, you have to act like family right now. We really need you." Megan left a message 3 minutes later, her voice tight with rising panic. "Lauren, you have to fix this. Jonathan's uncle is furious with us, and his parents won't even look at me. Jonathan is actually threatening to call off the wedding entirely. You're making us look terrible. Just call them and tell them we have a good, loving relationship. Call me back immediately." I sat in the quiet of my office and listened to their frantic, pathetic pleading. For 29 years, I had desperately craved their validation. I had waited for a simple invitation to their table. Now, they were standing outside the fortress I had built with my own 2 hands, begging for access, simply because I suddenly held all the power in the room. They weren't sorry for ignoring me. They were terrified that my absence was actively destroying their carefully curated lives. I didn't scream. I didn't draft a long, emotional text explaining how much they had hurt me. I didn't owe them a dramatic confrontation or the satisfaction of my anger. True retaliation isn't a screaming match. It's a complete, permanent withdrawal of access. My cold silence was my final, lethal weapon. I looked at the voicemails on my screen. I hovered my finger over the delete button. I didn't feel sadness. And I didn't feel pity. I just felt the cold, hard weight of a perfectly balanced ledger. I pressed delete, erasing their frantic voices permanently, and set my phone down in total, unshakable silence. That following Tuesday, the pale morning light of the Chicago skyline spilled across my mahogany desk as I formally signed the massive retainer contract with Jonathan's family trust. The heavy paper felt substantial under my pen, a tangible testament to the professional empire I had constructed entirely on my own. The office was perfectly quiet, save for the low hum of the city waking up outside my window. There were no missed calls from Angela today. No frantic, demanding texts from Megan. The silence they had once used as a cruel weapon against me had officially transformed into my absolute greatest shield. I set the pen down, picked up my coffee, and looked out over the sprawling city. I've come to realize that holding on to the desperate hope of a toxic family's approval is exactly like paying a massive debt you never actually owed. Letting go of bloodlines isn't a tragic, heartbreaking loss. It is a profound, incredibly necessary liberation. For years, I foolishly believed that if I just worked hard enough, if I just stayed quiet enough, they would eventually see my worth. I thought the shared blood in our veins meant I was legally and morally obligated to endure their constant dismissal. But true peace requires leaving the toxicity behind, completely and unapologetically. Finding yourself often means having the courage to walk away from the people who are fundamentally committed to making you feel invisible. I had spent my entire life building my career in the dark shadows, mistakenly believing that operating without a cheering audience was a curse. I see now that it was my ultimate freedom. When you build your life without an audience of toxic critics, there is absolutely no one left to disappoint. You don't have to contort your proudest achievements to comfortably fit their fragile, insecure egos. You don't have to shrink yourself so they can feel incredibly tall. My success belonged solely to me because I was the only one who ever showed up to do the grueling, invisible work. Forgiveness isn't always for the other person. Sometimes it's the only way to set yourself free. But my forgiveness does not require a fake reconciliation. I forgave them for being entirely incapable of loving me, but I firmly refused to give them a front row seat to the beautiful life I had earned. They wanted me to be the forgotten spare, the quiet girl who sat in the background. Instead, I became the undeniable, unstoppable force that exposed their hollow reality. I took a deep, steadying breath, feeling the genuine warmth of the morning sun against my skin. The heavy, suffocating burden of trying to belong to a family that never wanted me was finally lifted from my shoulders. The ledger was officially closed. The account was permanently settled. I stood up, smoothed my suit jacket, and prepared to start my day. I didn't need their $15,000 dinners or their fake performative toasts. I had my peace, my integrity, and the absolute certainty that the empire I built unseen was infinitely stronger than the fragile illusion they were so desperately trying to maintain. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic family to find your own success? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.